The Flydigi BS1 promises to provide equivalent performance to the top-end laptop cooling pads out there on the market at a fraction of the noise level, which if true would by far make this the best laptop cooling pad that money can buy. But it's a little more complicated than that. Let me go ahead and explain. See, the Flydigi BS1 is not a cheap laptop cooling pad by any means, selling for about $100 right now, putting it right in line with the top-end laptop coolers, including the IETS GT600 and Llano laptop cooling pad, both of which from my previous testing are two of the top laptop cooling pads by a considerable margin. These two coolers focus on what I like to call a brute force approach, basically where they seal off any kind of air from escaping using a foam border and then use a single high-powered fan to move as much air as possible through your system. Like these other two laptop cooling pads, this cooler does go for a very similar brute force approach when it comes to getting air through your system, by providing a single large high-powered 3000 RPM fan and sealing off the gaps, keeping air from escaping. But what makes this cooler unique is that they decided to make two dedicated chambers to kind of aim the airflow to either side of your laptop, which for some models actually makes a lot of sense, particularly gaming laptops, which typically have two different fans, one for your CPU and one for your GPU. This kind of aims the air exactly where you need it. But it can also be limiting for other models, as we'll see later. Additionally, the foam border, although it's there, is very, very thin, and it's not nearly as dense as something like the IETS GT600, which basically eliminates all air from escaping. And from my testing, I found that this cooler definitely has a limitation where for certain laptops that are a little more rounded, air does escape. Continuing on with the design of this laptop cooling pad, it's completely powered over Type-C, and one of the big limitations here is that although it does come with a cable, if you want to unlock Flydigi's so-called overclocking mode, you need your own dedicated wall outlet. Basically, you need over 18 watts available to you, which you're not going to get from a USB-C port on most laptops. So that's definitely a limitation, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because both the Llano and IETS do have to have their own dedicated wall outlet, but they do come in the box, so just keep that in mind when you're looking at pricing. Speaking of the overclocking mode, you control the speed of your fans by a single button on the right side of the cooler. This allows you to also turn it on and switch between the four dedicated modes. One at 3000 RPM, one at 2700 RPM, one at 2100 RPM, and one at 1300 RPM. Each of these modes is basically indicated by three lights on either side of the cooler. And one interesting thing I did actually find about this cooler that I do think is super cool is that it's super adjustable, making it great for larger laptops. As you can actually adjust this bottom piece, allowing for something absolutely massive, well over like an 18-inch laptop, which you can't say or see with something like the Llano or IETS, which are always going to be a little confined for space. Now let's go ahead and hop into some performance, because although it could be designed well and have some cool features, that really doesn't matter if it doesn't run well, because in that case, who really cares? So for all my testing that I've done over the past couple of years, I've used my Asus GL552, which is an older gaming laptop that runs super hot, and it did the day I bought it, so I love using it for these types of tests. Starting off with my idle test, I found that the BS1 was able to perform quite well, dropping CPU temps by about 15 degrees Celsius, but it was still out of range of some of the top coolers like the Llano or IETS GT600. And continuing my testing, I also found that the stress test was also very similar when it came to the performance of the BS1, because it didn't perform much better than the $12 Lines or Kaiben 2-fan coolers. This trend continued with the GPU stress test as well. However, in real-world performance, which we tested using PC Mark 10 and Performance Test 11, I found that the cooler did an adequate job sitting right in line or just below the top end of the market, which you should expect for this high of a price point. But still, the performance in my opinion was honestly just a little disappointing to me, as I expected a lot more for how much this cooler actually costs. But here's where the details start to get interesting, as I noticed that on this Asus laptop, all the ventilation is towards the front of the bottom cover, and the cooler was sending air towards the back, basically giving it no room to actually penetrate the laptop. And honestly, to be able to get any kind of air into the system, I had to put the laptop a lot higher than I wanted to, kind of making it unstable. So with that said, I decided to see how well this cooler would stack up with maybe a different style of laptop, like this Lenovo Legion, which has full ventilation along the back half of the bottom cover, making it a great candidate for testing. And after doing so, even compared to the GT600 and Llano, it turns out this cooler worked pretty well. just 1 degree warmer at idle and slightly cooler on the CPU under load, and this continued with the GPU stress test, where in firm mark it only reached 64.5 degrees Celsius, which is over 20 degrees cooler than stock, better than both the IETS and Llano offerings. This translated into some really good real-world performance for both PC Mark 10 and Performance Test 11, where I was able to sit right in line with both of the coolers, which was really good to see, and it's definitely one of the only laptop coolers that's come anywhere close anytime recently during my testing. This was really impressive, especially when you look at the noise level that this laptop cooling pad actually generates, because not only was it able to perform very close to the IETS GT600 and Llano, it was significantly quieter by 3 to 8 decibels respectively, at only 67 decibels under full operation. This is enough to notice a significant difference, and I commend Flydigi for being able to do this, because it's really hard and most companies struggle to keep up with both the performance and noise level of these two coolers. And I will say that sound profile, even though it is 67 decibels, was actually not all that bad. Go ahead and take a listen. And as you guys just heard, the Flydigi BS1 is not all that bad of a cooler, as it performs quite well, running a lot quieter than something like the IETS GT600, and it's significantly quieter than something like the Llano, and at $100, it's cheaper too if you don't include the cost of a dedicated power adapter, making it an incredibly compelling option for those who want the best of both noise and performance. But remember, this is only true if you have air intake towards the back of the bottom cover of your laptop. And if you don't, I'd probably stay away from this cooler altogether, because getting something like the Llano or IETS GT600, in my opinion, are probably better overall coolers, because they do have better compatibility with smaller laptops like a 14-inch laptop or anything that doesn't have air intake towards the top. With that said, you definitely do need to keep that in mind if you're gonna buy something like this, because it definitely is specialized. And like always, if you do want something cheap, definitely look at something like the Kaiben or Line's 2-fan coolers, because those perform very well at only $12, and those are still my favorite budget options out there. And I will have both of those, as well as every single cooler tested in this video, linked down below if you guys want to go ahead and check them out. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more content like this, and check out this video here where we went ahead and built our own laptop cooler using Noctua fans. It was a lot of fun, and I'll see you guys in the next one.